Imagine being fined hundreds of thousands of dollars by a group of people who claim authority over your own land, only to discover that you actually own their entire neighborhood. Sounds like the plot of a Netflix drama, right? Well, buckle up, because this story isn't fiction. It's about a man who flipped the script on a powerful homeowners association, exposed their arrogance, and walked away with far more than just a moral victory. In many American suburbs, homeowners associations, HOAs, are notorious. They regulate everything from the color of your front door to how tall your grass can grow. Step out of line, and the fines start stacking up. These organizations often present themselves as the guardians of community standards. But too often they cross into harassment. For one man, that harassment reached a boiling point. He lived on a sizable piece of land that had been in his family for generations. He raised cattle, maintained his property, and worked his land the way he saw fit. But as new housing developments began creeping closer to his fields, conflict became inevitable. The shiny, uniform homes of suburbia had arrived, complete with an HOA that wanted to impose its rules on everything around it. At first, the notices seemed minor. Complaints about fencing, noise from cattle, and even the presence of farm equipment near the property line. But soon, the HOA escalated. They accused him of violating community regulations, even though his land was not part of their development. That didn't stop them. The HOA board sent threatening letters. They demanded compliance. And then came the bombshell, a staggering $250,000 fine for so-called violations on his own land. It was a classic power move. Bully someone until they fold. Many homeowners, terrified of mounting legal fees, would have backed down. But this man didn't. When he received the notice, he didn't yell. He didn't argue. He didn't panic. Instead, he gathered his documents. Property deeds, land surveys, and ownership records that stretched back decades. What the HOA didn't know, or perhaps didn't care to check, was that his land wasn't just adjacent to their neighborhood. It was the foundation of it, literally. When the neighborhood was built, developers had signed a complex agreement. The homes, the roads, and even the HOA itself sat on parcels of land that were, in fact, leased. And the ultimate landowner? The very man they were trying to fine. So while the HOA claimed authority over him, the truth was reversed. He held the ultimate power. They owed him for occupying his land. Instead of folding under their threats, he hit back. Through his attorney, he reminded the HOA of the actual chain of ownership. The $250,000 fine wasn't just invalid, it was laughable. Because if push came to shove, he had the legal right to revoke their lease agreements. That meant every single homeowner in that community would be at risk of losing their property. The power dynamic flipped overnight. Suddenly, the HOA, once aggressive and smug, was scrambling. Their threats carried no weight. Their arrogance had backfired spectacularly. Stories like this resonate deeply, especially in the UK and the US, because they highlight universal themes: the abuse of authority, the underdog victory, the justice twist. There's a special satisfaction when the bully discovers they've been targeting someone who actually holds all the cards. In a time when ordinary people often feel powerless against corporations, landlords, or local councils, this story offers a spark of hope. It isn't just about one man and one HOA. It's about the broader issue of land ownership, property rights, and the arrogance of unchecked organizations. In the US, HOAs have been criticized for everything from racial discrimination to extortion-level fines. In the UK, while HOAs aren't common, residents face similar frustrations with freeholders and management companies who impose endless service charges. The principle is the same: people in power exploiting the system until someone fights back. And here's the kicker: the story doesn't end with the man proving ownership. The fallout was far more dramatic. What happens when hundreds of families discover that the land beneath their feet belongs to someone else? What happens when an HOA, once drunk on power, realizes they've been humiliated in front of everyone? That's where the real fireworks begin. In the next part, we'll explore how he turned this revelation into long-term leverage, what it meant for the community, and why this story still echoes today as a cautionary tale for anyone who underestimates the quiet strength of a landowner. The revelation that he owned the land beneath the entire neighborhood spread like wildfire. At first, it was whispers among the HOA board members, a private panic they hoped to contain. But word has a way of leaking, and soon homeowners themselves began to learn the truth. Imagine discovering that the man your HOA tried to bully, the man they mocked for being out of step with their pristine suburban rules, actually held the deed to the very ground under your feet. Shock turned into outrage. Some homeowners directed their anger at the HOA, furious that the board had provoked such a powerful landowner. Others were terrified. What if he evicted them? What if their mortgages, already strangling them financially, were suddenly worthless? Because the land didn't belong to them. The neighborhood had been sold the dream of suburban stability, and in a single week, that dream began to unravel. The man at the center of it all didn't rush into revenge. He could have, legally, taken a scorched earth approach. He could have revoked leases, started proceedings to dismantle the entire community, and left hundreds of families scrambling. And in the eyes of many, he would have been justified. They had tried to strip him of dignity, fine him into submission, and erase his rights on his own ancestral land. But instead of reacting with fury, he played a different game, one that was far more devastating. He called a meeting, not with the HOA board, but with the homeowners themselves. Flyers appeared on doorsteps. Notices were slipped into mailboxes. It was an open invitation to everyone in the neighborhood. Come to the edge of the farmland, the place where the conflict had begun, and hear the truth. The turnout was overwhelming. Dozens of families showed up, curiosity and fear written on their faces. Police cars idled nearby, a reminder of the earlier confrontations. And there he stood, calm, steady, dressed in the same work clothes he always wore, looking every bit, the man of the land. When he spoke, it wasn't with anger, but with authority. He explained the history of his property, how his family had held it for generations, long before the developers arrived with promises of luxury living. He laid out the agreements that tied their homes to his land, documents that proved the HOA's attempt to fine him was not only baseless, but laughably hypocritical. And then he said the line that would echo across the neighborhood for years. You don't fine the man who owns the ground under your house. Gasps spread through the crowd. Some homeowners looked horrified. Others began to laugh, nervous, incredulous laughter at the absurdity of the HOA's arrogance. The board members who had shown up stood pale-faced, exposed before the very people they claimed to represent. But he wasn't finished. He told the families he had no intention of destroying their lives. He wasn't their enemy. The land was his, yes, but his fight wasn't with them. It was with the self-appointed rulers who had overstepped every boundary. And then he made his move. Through his lawyers, he restructured the agreements. The HOA was stripped of its power. The board could no longer levy arbitrary fines, enforce cosmetic rules, or harass residents into submission. Instead, the homeowners would pay a small direct land use fee to him, bypassing the corrupt association entirely. The man they had been told was a problem had just become their protector. For many residents, it was a strange kind of liberation. They had hated the HOA for years but felt trapped, unable to fight a system that seemed untouchable. Now, the very person the board tried to crush had dismantled that system. Overnight, the man they once viewed as an outsider became a quiet hero. The HOA, of course, tried to push back. Lawsuits were threatened, letters were drafted, but the legal foundation was ironclad. They had built their empire on land that wasn't theirs to control. Every attempt they made to claw back power only sank them deeper into humiliation. Lawyers advised retreat. Board members resigned in disgrace. What had begun as an arrogant show of dominance ended as one of the most spectacular cell phones in HOA history. The story spread far beyond the neighborhood. Local news stations picked it up, fascinated by the David and Goliath twist. Online forums lit up with discussions. In the U.S., it became another cautionary tale about HOAs, those dreaded neighborhood overlords. In the UK, readers drew parallels to management companies and freeholders who nickel and dime residents with endless charges. Everywhere, people recognized the same pattern: unchecked power collapsing when someone dared to fight back. And the man himself? He carried on much as before. He still worked his land, raised his cattle, and walked the fields his family had always walked. But now, when he passed by the neighborhood that had once threatened him, people waved. Some stopped to thank him. Children who once whispered about the angry man with cows now saw him as the neighbor who had protected their families from endless fines and petty harassment. There's a deeper reason why this story hits so hard, especially in places like the US and UK. It's because it flips a narrative people are tired of. Usually, the little guy loses. Usually, bureaucracy crushes the individual. Usually, the person with money, lawyers, or official titles comes out on top. But here, the underdog wasn't under at all. He had power that no committee, no letterhead, and no stack of fines could erase. He just had to remind them of it. It's a reminder that ownership, real, tangible ownership, still matters. Not the illusion of control handed down by committees, but the kind that comes with deeds, history, and backbone. The HOA thought they were playing a game of intimidation. Instead, they stepped into a fight they could never win. And the most poetic part? They fined him $250,000. But by the end, the only ones paying were them. Not just financially, but in credibility, respect, and reputation. Their empire crumbled, not with violence or shouting, but with a simple truth. You cannot bully the person who holds the ground beneath your feet. That's why this story endures. It's not just about one man's land or one arrogant board. It's about justice. It's about the quiet satisfaction of watching those who abuse power discover that they are, in fact, powerless. And it's about the kind of strength that doesn't need to roar because it's rooted in something deeper than rules or threats. It's rooted in the soil itself.